So before, what's going to happen now in a few minutes, we're going to chant Ashrei, and we'll put the Sifrei Torah away, and our Yizkor service, as was announced in the email earlier this week, will take place right after the Kedusha as part of our Musaf Amidah. But as we are all gathered together, we started this a couple of years ago. I like to take the opportunity to invite someone from our community just to share what I would call their Beth El story, and why it is that this place matters to us so much. And today we're going to hear from Jenna Hyland, who was a member here for several years, took a little jaunt to Atlanta for a few months, and then came back and joined us as our membership and program coordinator. And she is going to share with us her story, why Bethel. Okay. Yeah.
So Rabbi Graber asked me to say something about what does Bethel mean to me in 25 words. And I couldn't do it. I wrote out a couple pages, but I have those pages with me, and I'd like to read this out loud if you could just sort of roll along with this. Yeah. I am a member of the Bethel community, a Bethelian, if you will. This is my home, and I belong here. That statement has been 34 years in the making. I'm 34 years old, by the way. I was born with a lot of privilege. I have fair skin, all my limbs, my sex organs match my identity. I had 2 parents at the time who changed my diapers and dropped me minimally. Those 2 people were also very damaged and mentally ill. And after a short while, they found themselves not up to the task of basic parenting. That led to me spending many years of my youth as what a nice lady on NPR would call homeless. But you couldn't have told me that then. When I was in it, I just called it normal. To me, walking with authority into a hotel continental breakfast room and filling my pockets for the week was mundane grocery shopping. I suspected that not everyone was getting their weekly bath by hopping fences into pools at night, but I never gave a second thought to all those years that I spent sleeping with my shoes on, not knowing if I would have to run or if I could sleep through the night. Functionally an orphan, typical Bethelian. This is my home, and I belong here. I'm just your typical gal. I'm covered in tattoos. I'm a single mother, single mom to a typical 4th grader who picks out his bow tie the night before picture day. I have ADHD, PTSD, and a master's degree. I have cousins I know as brothers, a brother I hardly know, and parents whose whereabouts are best described as at large and have been for decades. I was 23 when I learned that you don't burn tires to get rid of tires. Tire fires, typical Bethelian. About 5 years ago, I knew little about Jewish practices and next to nothing about community. I'd moved to Durham for a job when I immediately and unceremoniously sprained my ankle. I was using a Swiffer as a crutch, and I ditched it in the car to hobble unassisted into the building on my first day. A stiff upper lip was my currency. After a walking tour of the 5-story building, I'm filling out paperwork and I get to the life insurance beneficiary line. And I know I can't list my son, a minor, because some blood relative could pop up out of the woodwork and claim him for the money that was attached to him to finally finance that jet ski or buy a hog for a hunt. So I popped my head up over the cubicle wall to the clean-looking lady who mentioned she had a kid, because I remember in 3rd grade some Scruff McGruff pamphlet saying, if you're ever lost in the mall, find a nice lady with kids. And I loved school, and I internalized all semi-scholastic information, so that was just there inside me. So I lean over and ask her to remind me her last name. Oh yeah, and just your social security number. I don't know if I was nonchalant because I never thought of insuring or valuing my life, or if I was doing my best impression of nonchalant because this was seriously my very best option, and I was terrified that if she considered it for more than a moment, she'd say no. Not long after that, I was at my first Friday night service at Bethel, and I was hungry. So surely you've gathered by now that I know what hungry is, and I'm not just going to toss around that word. I was there, hungry, willing services to go on, to not end, praying for longer services, typical Bethelian, right? I needed it to go on because I knew that when it ended, I could drag my feet on the walk home, but eventually I would have to find a fun mom way of telling my son that we had no dinner. No dinner because we had no food. No food because we had no money. But before you settle in for the Sadness Olympics, let me stop you. Because I had no money because I had just scraped up my every last dollar without exception to put a down payment and close on a house, my very own house. Never in my life had I been able to imagine what that could feel like. And here I was doing it. I was so proud and hopeful and hungry. So services do end. I promise they do. I pick up my face. We're gathering our books, and a woman whips her head around from the row ahead and says at me, "You want to come for Shabbos?" Now, having spent my most recent years rambling around Georgia, I knew I couldn't accept the first invite because that's rude. I was to politely decline several times and on a subsequent offer accept. But there was something about her words, "You want to come for Shabbos?" that led me to believe she might not be from the South. She was therefore probably not beholden to the particular social mores. Plus, I was hungry. And as I stammered and stuttered, my brain having already eaten holes in itself, she interrupted, "Nah, you'll come for Shabbos." Following strangers to a second location is a real no-no in my experience, but hungry is impactful. But what I walked into was a candle-lit feast. The most delicious schmaltzy chicken and challah and wine and dilly beans. Y'all, they pickle green beans. The food heaped on, and it wasn't rude that I was packing away plates. It was met with delight and bottomless pots and pans, and we ate, and we were full and nourished and comfortable. Typical Bethel. 2 years ago, I took 5 planes, an armed convoy, and a couple of helicopters to the remote reaches of northeast Nigeria for work. In the course of that work, I was detained, falsely imprisoned, and for murky legal reasons, we will not be using the word kidnapped, though I was assaulted, mentally, physically, and sexually. And after smuggling myself out of the country on U.S. soil weeks later, I received many a compliment about how I'd lost weight. You go, girl. Well, I continued to lose weight. I continued to have ice-cold diarrhea, and my hair fell out. It was hard to live, and I almost didn't. I hardly left my house for a year, and when I did, it was often to a Shabbat dinner or to Bethel, which took everything I had. I was easily overwhelmed by lights or sounds or people, and I would run away, sometimes quite literally, to hide and to heave and to try to breathe. And when I would emerge, I never felt anything but welcome. You were warm and curious, but never pushing, willing to accept me at whatever level I wanted to participate. You all made me feel that I was typical. And shortly after meeting you, my son decided that he wanted to go to Hebrew school, Talmud Torah. I didn't know how much it cost, but if you have to ask, you can't afford it. So I said we'd start saving for next year. But he wanted to go. He worked his way around, clamping hands and espousing his desire for Jewish education. So one evening, I get a call from Rabbi Graber. "Jenna, good news! Someone has made an anonymous donation in your son's name for him to attend Hebrew school." I say, "Oh, wow, okay, that's very generous. I don't know if I can accept. I'll have to think about it and get back to you." To which he says, "Oh, it's not for you. It's for him. See you Sunday." And that was it. There's never been a question about us. Never been a question about us being part of this community. You all just acted as if we belonged here. And now, if at any point during this talk you're thinking, if that's typical, then, if you think to yourself, you never thought burning tires was how one gets rid of tires, or you're not wearing coveralls under your kittle. If you're thinking that at any point, good, because that means you are the typical Bethelian. Because every member of this community is thinking wildly different things from you at every moment of every day. And there's a lot we agree on, but agreeing is very different than thinking the exact same things the same ways. Every one of us is weird on the inside, guaranteed. And that's rad. And that's the norm here at Bethel. And that is part of what's so striking and so powerful about the times when we all come together, weird on the inside and unified on the outside. Look around at us today, heads capped, shawls donned, leather shoes at home, mouths dry, rising and lowering at the same time. We are here packed in on the edges of our seats, leaning to see, straining to hear, standing in the back, and we are all here right now for the same reason. And that's that today these gates are open, and tomorrow they will not be. And what that means to each of you and how that rattles around inside you, what that stirs, is different. For me, I hear scribbling. Being written in the book of life is my story. It's not a thumbs up or down. It's where I've come from, what I've been through and experienced. And I'm grateful to share it. Up here in snippets today, and over the past years in community with you, my story, my book of life, now includes you. The scribbling I hear right now is humbling, because in this chapter, I'm standing here. Because you have given me a home, and that is not something I thought I got to have. Your generosity and your warmth and the way you show up for each other, the way you show up for me, that's what makes you a typical Bethelian. And this is our home, and we belong here. And God willing, we'll have many more chapters.